Welcome to the show today. My name is Douglas Gabriel. I'm here with John Barnwell, and we're doing the second part on the deeper secrets of perception as revelation of the spirit. And so now we get to go, as I like to call it, out into the weeds and start talking about all the different things that you're probably thinking about the second that we're talking about what is perception and what is higher perception, like extrasensory perception. So welcome to the show today, John.
Well, hello again. And this is amongst my favorite topics. We've repeatedly made the point about wisdom, beauty, and strength. And so wisdom, that's the manas. Beauty, that's buddhi. And then strength, well, that's the will, that's the atman. And so when you look at, like, for example, comparing the Eastern Orthodox Church to the Western Church. The Western Church, they codified everything and made it like it was a legal document, whereas the Eastern Church, they came from the philosophic stream from out of Greece. And so you find that their path is really having to do with the rites that they practice that bring them into an emotional state. And so their whole process is a process of reverence, that finding beauty through reverence is the key to understanding the difference between the churches in the West and in the East. And so, well, why am I saying that? Well, because Rudolf Steiner repeatedly makes a point that people study these materials, but they leave out the pursuit of beauty, and that it's so important. He recommended schools have the painting of Raphael with the Madonna and Child in the classroom. And so there was always this beautiful element in the work of Rudolf Steiner with the first Goetheanum and the second Goetheanum and all the work with Lejeune painting and all the various forms of eurythmy. And so it has to do with awakening one's sensitivities to beauty.
So true. Wisdom, beauty, strength, or wonder, awe, and reverence, or moral imagination, moral inspiration, moral intuition. Now, those things you can say, why are you bringing this up? Because it's part of perception. Because when you talk about perception, you then once you break down the mechanics of it, which we could go into all the brain parts that relate to mental imaging and the way that a thought of the divine actually causes more neurons to go off in all three parts of your brain, the frontal, middle, and the thinking, feeling, and willing part of the brain, the front, middle, and the back. But really, it comes down to consciousness now, doesn't it? So you might say, well, how can I personally, because I'm not clairvoyant, come to higher consciousness, higher perception? We described in the first video that if you have a worldview and you understand the ethers and you understand what it is you're looking at, then you have a whole life to bring into perception. But it's actually quite simple and more simple than that. For instance, in the old days, I used to work with a lot of the people down at the medical center at the university and this big hospital down there, because they were doing brain research. And in those days, it was just beginning. Now it's very, very advanced. In those days, they were able to tell by your brain waves that if you were in beta brainwave, which I always forget, so I actually wrote it down. Beta is 12 to 19 hertz. You're in thinking. So they can put it up on the screen and you can use your mind as a mouse to control the screen by using that particular brainwave. And that's the one that is the most awake. Steiner would call that waking. Then there's also dreaming, and there's also dreamless sleep. Well, those are also brain waves. So if you go into your feelings, then you drop into alpha, which is 8 to 12 hertz. And if you're in your sleeping state, you're in delta, 1 to 4 hertz. Now, there are 3 other states that are actually coincident with these. But if you get the overall state of gamma, which is 26 to 70 hertz, which is, of course, very high, it connects all the others. And so there's also mu and there's also theta, but those are feeling and willing. So if you can control your brain waves, so now you think, well, how do I control my brainwave? There's no dial on my head. Well, it's very simple. Do you not know when you're dreaming? So if you're in a conscious waking state and you drop down into a dreaming state, you will know it because you are no longer hyper awake. You are in a state where everything is fluid. You're in a condition where images, two-dimensional images, are constantly flowing into you from all directions. This is what happens right before you go to sleep, isn't it? So this is a condition that puts you into the most imaginative realm and the most imaginal realm, where if you can stay in that state between waking and sleeping, you start to see all these images, but they're not personal. They don't really belong to you. They're not part of your memory. They may not even be part of your conscious perception, but they're flowing in and out of you. But at a certain point, you can start to control them. So this is in many spiritual paths, what they say is waking up in your dream, and that actually creates a higher consciousness. Now, we discussed before the telepathy tapes and the fact that now it's being realized that children who are nonverbal actually in their dreams every night go to like their egregore, their group soul. They call it the hill, and there are a few friends of theirs who they can talk to one another. But if they have a question, and this is one of the more amazing things that I just recently heard about, then all they have to do is ask someone who knows, and they come there to the hill and teach them. It could be another savant child, or it could be a Hebrew rabbi, it could be God, it could be whatever they need to have explained to them. So when you're in a dreaming state, if you can get to waking up in your dreaming state, now that's a type of perception that is a different type of perception than waking consciousness and what we've talked about before. Now we're talking about looking inside of yourself, looking at your own waking consciousness inside of your dreams. So some of these teachers say if you can just look at your hands, if you're there and you can connect with your willpower, your hands, your feet, your metabolic system, then you can wake up. You can bring this life, the same life that you'd bring to awakening perception, you'd bring to awakening dream life perception. Now, that is an amazing thing because that's the realm of archangels, as John has mentioned, and that it's the realm of inspiration. And if you're a moral being and you're in that realm, when you come out, you're going to have a whole sounding of the harmony of the spheres, the music of the spheres. You're going to literally say to people the thing that, people think religious people are silly, that they heard the music of the angels and that they're playing in singing in a choir and playing in a symphony. Well, in fact, it's really similar, very similar to that. But also, as always, the same thing happens in your own human body. So you can go in or you can go out into the planets. Either way, when you come to the realm of dreaming, it changes your perception, changes your consciousness, and you're actually seeing things that perhaps you never had a sense impression from. This is a realm where creation can come out of nothingness. And so that's the second realm, thinking, feeling, and feeling we're dreaming, and thinking we're awake. But when it comes to your willpower, you are asleep. Can you wake up in your dream life as you go into really, which is dreamless sleep, or it could be called trance consciousness? Can you wake up in that realm? If you did, then you'd be able to perceive everything that has ever happened to anyone in your biological stream, your DNA stream, back to whoever you came from, whichever of the three Eves out of Africa you'd like to associate with, or from Lemuria, or wherever you think that you came from. You have all of that in your DNA. So when you drop into your subconscious, your unconscious, your trance conscious, where you have dreamless, no dreams, it's dreamless sleep, you actually have all the capacities that humans have ever had. And some people will tell you that because we have seen superhuman capacities come out of somebody who's in a state of fear where they can lift up a car or pull off a car door or do some superhuman feat. Well, in our willpower, we have superhuman capacities. Every capacity you've ever heard of any spiritual master or any great wisdom teacher that they have. So the 7 gifts of the spirit, what they'd call the siddhas of the fakirs of the East, you have all of those. But you're going to have to get out of your waking mind, your dreaming mind, and say, I dream that I have those powers. No, that's not going to work. It's nice you have a feeling that you'd like to be able to turn invisible. But the reality is you're going to have to do some work to do so. And there's a special path you can follow in the East where they teach you to levitate, to turn invisible, to be able to withstand hot and cold, to go without eating. Whatever of these capacities you think are superhuman, they're not. They've already been developed in the past by other beings. In other words, we're all superheroes.
Yeah, well, that harkens back to the conversation we had yesterday, and with all the fires raging in California, that the Paramahansa Yogananda Center is fine, and he's still laying there in state and smells like roses. And so, when you look at these things, you look at like his teacher's teacher. So that would be Sri Yukteswar's teacher, Lahiri Mahasaya. And his wife kept giving him a hard time. He was arguing with him. And later on in the day, she goes into the bedroom and he's in there meditating and he's levitating about a foot off the floor. So these things are right next to you, but you're not there yet, but you are there. It's that your consciousness has not become aware within that realm. And so you talk about the inner and the outer. In the East, that's the Grail stream of the inward, the inward mystical reverence to the heart. And then you go to the mysteries of the West, and you have the Druid mysteries and the Droton mysteries and the mysteries of Wotan or Odin, and that those are the mysteries of the bliss of going out into the cosmos, and that these two have come together through the mysteries of the Grail and the Rosicrucian stream. And so it behooves one to be able to unveil those parts that are already there. Because when you do that, when you're able to have intention regarding your thoughts, that gives you the ability to kind of peel back the veil of Isis. It says, no mortal has lifted my veil. Well, that's because you have to become an immortal to be able to lift the veil. It's a simple little riddle, but it's ultimately the truth. And so in looking at these things, you can come to understand, again, I keep quoting this sentence, but Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras says, meditation is the cessation of the modifications of the mind.
So you speak of heroes and you speak of Isis. Well, Isis starts off by saying, I am the past, the present, the future. Okay, let's talk about perception. Can you have perception of the past, the present, the future? Yes, you can. Can you be Prometheus? Can you be Hercules, or can you be Epimetheus so that you have knowledge of the past? Well, that's what your waking mind does. It reflects upon things, has a memory, makes judgments, makes concepts, deposits them in your brain, and then you use them for all your future percepts. Every perception, you take your world of concepts with you. But you must break loose the Hercules that has been chained to the mountain. Prometheus has been chained to the mountain. Hercules has to break it with his club. They said that, no sword could cut it, no metal could cut the chain, but his club could. So when you break yourself free of just your waking mind and you wake up in your dreams, or you wake up in your willpower, you are a hero. You are a superhero, as a matter of fact. So this gives you, of course, it gives you different capacities. One of them is clairvoyance, which is telepathy, ESP. For those who have clairvoyance, usually if they've had it from birth, they say that most of them say the same thing. It's just as common. It's more common and easier than speaking, and it's much clearer. And you can't speak a lie. You can't send an ESP thought to somebody that's a lie. This shocks people. It's like, oh, because if I got it, I was going to do some very wicked things with it that I wanted to get back at some people. And then you can have clairvoyance, which you can see, clairaudience, which you can hear in the ear. We haven't gone too much into it, but it is super, super powerful organ. And then you have, which is linked to speaking. And then you have, of course, the heart, which Steiner calls moral technique. So in Buddhism, it says, I take refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, seeing, speaking, and the heart, which is really a higher form of hearing and action and knowing what to do because you've listened to the universe, to your supernature side. Remember, we have a subnature, a collective unconscious, but we have a supernature side. So we get clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience. So for a real clairvoyant, you hand them an object and they can tell you all about who had it, what if there's trauma that's been put into it, where it was, so on and so forth. Objects speak. So when we're talking about perception and you look at one object, but a psychic looks at that object, the psychic can tell you all kinds of things that you can't see. So we're going beyond and expanding the spectrum of our perception for thinking, feeling, and willing. And then it's a matter of, do you have the morality to be able to do something with what you see? Because it's anyone can take DMT and you will see you're a part of your astral body and part of your etheric body, and you're going to meet three parts, three women. They all most of these DMT people who take ayahuasca say they meet three women and they're all speaking three different languages, and your mission is to take the languages and understand it. Well, what is that? That's your thinking, feeling, and willing. You've crossed the threshold. To cross the threshold, you're going to have to see your etheric body. What's it going to look like? Geometric forms that are always moving and dynamic and acting as archetypes, as some people describe it, bubbles coming out of bubbles, not as a trip, but literally, physically, that this is the way they describe the substructure of the universe and the etheric. So when you want to perceive your inner self by taking a drug, remember, DMT is already in your body. LSD is in your body. It's just called LSM, monohydrate. The dopamines are in your body, serotonin's in your body, 1,000 different neurostimulators are in your body that if they activate, your perception changes. And as we know, Abraham Maslow tells us in the pyramid of self-actualization, at the top, once you take care of your basic needs, one of the most important things is that you alter your consciousness at least once a day. In other words, you disturb what you think you know from your perceptions, you must alter it. And that's why in so many religions, it's entheogens, theo, the word God is in there. It means a substance that can put you in contact with God, whether it be a psilocybin mushroom, a drop of LSD, whether it be a DMT or Jimson weed, or so many things change your consciousness. And that's why coffee is actually a poison. And so most foods are a poison. And if you take certain things, then you alter your consciousness. The question is, do you have the morality to do something with what happened from this higher perception? If was a higher perception, it might have been a lower perception. But if you are a moral person and you took one of these things and you went into the spiritual world, and Steiner says, yes, psychotropics do expose you to elements of the spiritual world, but they also expose you to the elemental beings that got you there, which is that's a bag of karma that you really don't want. So the point is how do you alter your consciousness? So do you alter your consciousness when you meditate? When you pray, when you concentrate? Yes, you do. You're taking these different realms of thinking, feeling, and willing, waking, sleeping, awaking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, and you're learning to manipulate them. In Steiner's words, he says that an initiate does not sleep at night for knowing of the suffering of others. And it's well known that Steiner slept very few hours a night because he didn't have to digest his day. He already digested it. He already understood the karmic implications. And so he didn't need to go into the spiritual world to go to a school where they said, you weren't so good today. But that's exactly what's happening. Your dream consciousness is a record of your digested sense perception. Now, that sounds strange. I should probably repeat that. So what you dream at night is really your attempt to digest your sense perceptions in the daytime. And so sense perceptions not only become a food of nourishment in the daytime, and if you're a spiritual person and you're looking out in the world and seeing heaven, you're getting spiritual nutrition from perception. If you're a nasty person, a very awful person, and you look out in the world and all you're experiencing is the bad vices that drive you, the 7 deadly sins, then really you're living in a hell. And so it matters, exactly as we've heard the great thinkers say, it isn't what you perceive, and perception isn't what you think, it's who you are.
Yes, like the good rabbi said, and so in looking at these things more closely, I remember, like when I used to know a lot of different people, and I used to give yoga classes to a group of psychiatrists from Harvard that were there doing the original research work with Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, who became Ram Dass and all that. But I used to teach a yoga class, just an informal thing on Wednesday nights, and there were other artistic type people, all people maybe 10 years or 20 years older than me, and leaders from the Gurdjieff's organization. And so it was a very eclectic mix. Now, why am I saying this? Because it doesn't really matter which path you're pursuing, because it boils down to the 3 things that Douglas keeps approaching from every possible vantage point. You have your thinking, you have your feeling, and you have your will. What is your relationship to your thinking and feeling and willing? Rudolf Steiner gives instructions, and he says, if you're facing somebody in a conversation and they're not telling the truth, don't react to it. That if one wants to be able to have clear vision in terms of like the akashic record and all of that, you can't have any sympathy and antipathy regarding the perceptions you're confronted with, that you have to have that equilibrium. So it all goes back to equilibrium. And what is the equilibrating force? The Christ. So as he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, while other teachers, Pythagoras or Moses, they had the truth and the way, but they didn't have the life. Christ was actually the manifestation of that life, of that logos. And that is the point of aspiration. He says, no one gets to the Father except through me. So you have to be able to approach that. And what is it? It goes back again. It's that sphere of beauty. That it's the beauty that gets you there. And you have your wonder and your awe. It's the realm of awe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, let's go one step further and say, what about these people like Rudolf Steiner who say they can perceive the Akashic record, the Akashic Chronicle, the Akasha, the Akasha ether? How does that happen? Can you do that? Can psychics do that? Are the children who are nonverbal autists do that? Well, they've already demonstrated they can do some, but people haven't asked them the right questions, or else they'd be able to tell you much, much more. Because when you're in the state of pure consciousness and you don't even know you have a body like some of those children, then you're free to travel wherever you want. So if you want to go to Egypt and study hieroglyphics, then the teacher shows up and instructs you and gives you what it is you're looking for. But what you'll also notice with people who are truly clairvoyant, they have very simple and blunt ways of telling you what they experience because it's just as clear as a table, as Rudolf Steiner says. When you're walking around on the earth, you're walking through a whole lot of spiritual beings. They're passing through your body at all times. So you got all nine hierarchy working in and through your body. So you don't have to go somewhere on an acid trip to figure out who you are. All you have to do is listen to yourself. Now, inside of yourself are these ethers, the warmth, light, sound, and life. You can study what they are and how they manifest. But when you come to Akasha, you're going to really get confused because Akasha it's the word that created everything that is the soundless word. It's the space that is empty. It's the opposite of everything that you can think. And so when you come to Akasha, you say, right now there's theories called the 0 point theories, or the basically that infinite energy arises from vacuums. So you can study Irvin Laszlo's work called the Akasha, or the Akasha theory, and many scientists and theories, and mostly almost every theory of everything talks about the ethers. Well, the Akasha ether is one that can't be described because it's not in any way physical, but it permeates all the other ethers. And it is the vacuum that scientists describe is the space inside of an atom in between the electron and the nucleus, with the proton. So an atom, they would say, is 90% space. Well, that space is Akasha. And every atom, every molecule, and so therefore every human being is imprinting into this vacuum space, into this empty space, the 0 point space, everything that there is. And a clairvoyant can actually not only see that, but it's not only a seeing, hearing, sounding, tasting, smelling, it's a knowing. And they can know things absolutely that happened in the past, the present, and the future.
Yes, and in the words of Paracelsus and Robert Flood, two venerated figures within the Rosicrucian alchemical stream, they call it the quintessence, that it's the fifth in the series, quint meaning five. And so when you get to work towards that as a point of aspiration, you could look at the processes that the alchemists were doing. And what were they doing working through these alchemical processes? They were working on their consciousness. They were working on being able to be in a state of perception of what is bringing about the transformation. That was the important thing. And that in beyond that it was something that was taking place through the agency of them in working with that harmony of the spheres and the whole, they call it the concourse of the elements, that there's this whole continually changing panorama of activity that we're surrounded by, but we don't see it, because we're busy with the primary five senses that we think are the be all end all. But in order to get into this brotherhoods, this is alluded to in the poem "The Mysteries" by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, where he talks about a group of 12, and they have a 13th. And that was in the Northern Mysteries, where I talked about how in the West that it was the mysteries of the macrocosm, the outside world, the mysteries of the microcosm, the inner world is the Grail stream, the early Grail stream. And so you have in those northern mysteries and mysteries in the West, amongst the Druids and the mysteries of Odin, they would always have 12, like the 12 Knights of the Round Table. And that's like your 12 fundamental processes. That's your 12 senses. Now, whether or not you have a conscious relationship to them, well, that's another matter. But at least once you figure out what the playing field is, then you can tailor your aspirations to unlock the potentials that exist within these 12 senses that are described by Rudolf Steiner in numerous places. And it's also to be found in the resource materials like Douglas's book, The Theory of Everything, and in many other places. So that once we develop the cosmology that gives us the thought content, gives us the manas, so we take the consciousness soul and through our aspirations transform it into the spiritual soul in preparation for approaching the spirit self. And the spirit self, that is that monastic principle. That is the higher mind. But when you get into the higher feeling, then you're going back to old sun. And that is something that lives within the realm of feeling, and again, is the sphere of beauty. But Rudolf Steiner is very clear. He says that in the condition before Earth evolution, we were in old moon, following after old sun, which followed after old Saturn. So you have your trance consciousness, old Saturn, and then you have your deep dreamless sleep of old sun, and then you have the dream state of old moon. He says, but as we move into the future, as we evolve beyond the human realm into the angelic realm, what happens is you enter again into that astral world that we were encountering on old moon, except this time we do it consciously.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because I hadn't been saying it in quite the right order. Waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep, trance consciousness. And when you reach trance consciousness, you have subconscious capacities that you didn't even know you had. You have memories, group soul memories of all kinds of things going all the way back. So when you're reading the akashic record, in some cases, you're just reading your own DNA. But when you read it as a true clairvoyant, you can actually go awake into the past or into the future and see people's motivation. You can see what they're even thinking, not even necessarily what they speak or what they did. You can actually see the spirit moving. Now, the future is hard to determine. Sometimes if you get a true precognitive dream or precognitive vision, it may not turn out exactly the same because humans have free will, so things change. Those are just inclinations of where people look like they're going and they're following a certain path. I've been asked to connect all of this to plasma, and I am so glad that I was asked to do so because when Ezekiel saw the chariot come down, what was it? It was a plasmoid. It has exact description of ball lightning, plasmoids. In the human body, and there's a clear distinction here, your blood is made up of 55% plasma, but that's totally different. They named it that because it was the wonder substance that carried the life of the human being. Well, there's plasma in 99.99% of the universe. Down here on Earth, we have atoms, supposedly, according to this scientific religion of beliefs, which are really guesses called theories. But anyway, the point is they're beginning to understand now that these beings, these orbs that are appearing everywhere, are probably the manifestation of higher beings. And so now they're saying plasmoids, which are a natural phenomena of the earth. Rudolf Steiner describes it in giving the wisdom that's found in the etheric formative forces by Gunther Wachsmuth, clearly describes this physical realm where cosmic substances are being transformed through cold fusion from one substance to another, from helium to O3, which is ozone, and from ozone into oxygen, which creates our atmosphere. From hydrogen, it's being transformed from cosmic hydrogen through these plasma clouds. It's being transformed into hydrogen peroxide and then later into water. So the basis of life on Earth, oxygen and water, and of course sunlight, which is what activates all this process in the plasma clouds, that's what gives us our life. But what we don't understand is that we are plasmic beings. In our heart, we have a magnetodynamic plasma generator because it's taking a stream of your blood, which is what I had said was the motivation for me studying perception for 40 or 50 years, whatever it's been, and not coming to many good conclusions. But I finally realized that cold fusion is happening in the heart, and there's also fusion happening in the brain. So with perception, they'd like to say it's all in the brain, but in fact, that is what's happening in the third ventricle of the brain, which looks exactly like, by the way, a Garuda bird, which is this bird that you fly on to go to the well of eternal life, where the bird dips down and drinks the soma or the amrita. Well, that's happening in your brain. And so there's a brain component of it, and that also creates literally a halo around you, around the earth. It's called the aurora borealis. But also in your heart, there's a halo, there's a glow, there's the bioenergetic energy of your entire body. Every single cell in your body is going through a chemical transformation that then imprints upon the blood, runs across the atriosynal node in your ventricle, and it creates a bioelectricity. Well, you can't usually see this unless you're clairvoyant. But if you could see it, then you'd see that the heart is on fire. That's where our fire comes from. In ancient Hindu scriptures, it talks about the flame next in between the heart and the lung that's as big as the person's end of their thumb. So there's a little flame going on there. And in Poa practices, they teach you how to extinguish that and die consciously. Or they teach you how to use that to levitate, or they teach you how to use your heart and that what I call cold fusion or a magnetohydrodynamic generator, which is it's still a top secret for the military. That's what they drive most of their military weapons, being fighters, planes, ships, submarines, aircraft carriers. They're all driven by magnetohydrodynamic generators. And we have it in the human body. And so everything in the universe that is actually real is in the human body. So we don't need to go anywhere besides right here to perceive the entire universe. The heart is the universe turned inside. Oh no, the universe is the heart turned inside out, and vice versa. So as we're looking at this, we are trying to ascend. Well, how do we ascend? Well, you can do it the quick way, like the Tibetans, where they meditate until they turn into flame and burn up and leave a little pile of ashes. And coming from the flame is a beautiful rainbow. And so this has happened many, many, many times. We know that in America, we've had, hundreds of cases of spontaneous combustion. How does that happen? Because if you could perceive, Rudolf Steiner said, if you could for one moment perceive what's actually happening in your physical body, you would burst into flames. He says that. And so if we can fine tune our perception, we can start to see the manifestation of the angels and the archangels and the archai in these plasmoid fields, plasmoid balls, and basically realize that we are using that as probably a type of vehicle that we will use when we dissolve the material plane, the plane of atoms, and go into the plane of plasma. We will be using a plasma vehicle. He says it will be round. It will be made out of carbon, and that's what's the crystals that are in plasmoids are carbon, and that it will be transparent. You'll be able to look through it. Will rise up off the surface of the earth and receive the true nourishment that our atmosphere filters for us, so that we don't get burned up alive down here by UV rays, gamma rays, and all the rest, cosmic rays, or even the sunlight, the warmth, light, sound, and life of the sun, so that we don't get burned up by it too fast. We have to evolve slowly. We have the atmosphere there as the wings of Christ wrapping around us and transforming cosmic elements into elements that humans can use, so that we can rise up and again rise up back to the realm we came from, which is a cosmic realm of the ethers.
Yes, and elsewhere, Rudolf Steiner points out that he says, when you look at the stars, you see them in the night sky. What you're seeing is the astral light. That's the light of the stars arising out of the astral. The blue sky through which the light passes through, see that as the etheric. And so you have the etheric is an arena in which things can take place. See, And that's kind of one way of looking at the way in which the ethers exist. And so you have this image, and then you have a counter image. And like what the point Douglas was making on complementary colors, if you stare at a green circle and then look at a white surface, you'll see a magenta circle. And it's that it used to be called flashing, uh, and it was a meditative technique of Hermetic Kabbalists, 100 years or so ago, and there's still people doing it. But the point is that when you see a green leaf, the reason you're seeing the green is because the leaf is actually magenta. So you're seeing the counter color to the magenta flower. And likewise with all your sense impressions. Rudolf Steiner describes what people look like to a horse. And if you want to have your brain rewired, just read that account, because they look at us and we're as if like these flaming beings coming up to them, So no wonder they do as they're told, It's funny. We assume that the world around us, that these creatures are all perceiving the world the way we perceive it, and they don't at all. They their consciousness is based on whatever state of being that their consciousness is based on, and so you have them in these various different stages of the astral light that their consciousness is perceiving through, and so they're I used to have these two cats. We had a old Siamese named Pasha, and then a younger black and white cat, black with white paws and white spots. But I used to chase my little elemental being around the living room. And yeah, it's funny because Pasha would just sit there. He'd just look at it, watch it. He didn't care. The other cat would chase it until she caught up with it. Then she'd look startled because she'd catch it and there wouldn't be anything in her hands, and it would fly away as a globe of light. But it was this little man. And before they lock me up talking about this, I'm just being very, very sincere. And, I know that I've shared seeing the same being with others like David Spangler, and when he chased it away with the brush of his hand. But so you have all these things around you that you do not perceive because you're so caught up with the things that you think you do perceive. And so it behooves you to discipline yourself to be able to just put yourself in the driver's seat and be able to take the kind of methodology that's given in Rudolf Steiner's books and Knowledge of Higher Worlds and the outline of esoteric science or occult science, it's published as sometimes. And that you find that if you work with these principles of discipline, that it brings you into a state to where you can make conscious decisions regarding these aspects of your being that we're calling here thinking, feeling, and willing. And so by being able to take full control, so to speak, especially with like the path that's laid out in the philosophy of freedom, where you're able to truly think about thinking. And if you can truly think about thinking, then that's basically learning how to think like an angel. That's basically what it is. And I remember taking that class with Hans Gabert at the Institute. I think I took that class 7 times. And we went through paragraph by paragraph. And when you break it down to the simplicity that's behind all those words are something to give people that are accustomed to thinking in abstract terms to be able to frame in their consciousness what exactly he's referring to, when actually he could have made the book 1 paragraph long.
Yes. I don't know quite where to go. I want to go 3 different directions. But anyway, with thinking, with philosophy of freedom, they really didn't like me coming to the study group because I just say, what's the big deal, folks? I mean, he clearly says that thinking arises as intuition of love. So, and then he says everything is love. So why are we debating this? Why don't we just love? And they didn't want to hear that. So you have to, as John says, it's just like a meditation. You have to use your thinking to concentrate, to contemplate. And then after tremendous effort, when you think you can't do any more and you keep extending that period of time longer and longer as you get, that's your pre-meditation, then at a certain point, it's like the people watching these telepathy tapes. They watch it, and after 2 minutes, they go, I'm a believer. Their whole life has changed. They now know that it's true, that everyone has that capacity. If these children have it, everybody has it. They're just using different senses because some senses have been damaged. So that's the moment of enlightenment. So you work, and all of a sudden you go, oh, I get it. And then it's almost impossible to let that go because you become ego identified with it and you think you're really some hot stuff because you were able to have an experience of enlightenment, the golden moment of enlightenment. That's only the beginning. Then you have to go to the next step because the golden moment of enlightenment is probably going to come in a kind of a dream consciousness where you go, oh, we're all one. The universe, I'm a plasma being, my heart beats with the rhythm that keeps the whole universe going. And when that happens and you actually really feel it, it explodes you. Enlightenment, golden moment of illumination. Then you get started because that's only the beginning. And then you go to the stages of initiation. So it's thinking, feeling, and willing. So in thinking, you have to work really hard. You can't skip over that. You have to be a student of wisdom. You have to be chasing her like she is your beloved, like everywhere you look, you're looking for her and her signs and all her different manifestations. And then in your feeling, you have to get to the same place that you get to every night before you go to sleep. What happens when you go to sleep? You fall into emptiness. You fall into the abyss. And if you have no faith, you're afraid you might not ever be able to sleep again. But if you have faith that someone's going to catch you, for me, it's Christ or Mary or Sophia or the Archangel Michael, they're going to catch you. They're going to carry you across the abyss. That's part of the program. The abyss has to be there. It's like all of these layers in between the atmospheres. They turn opposite. But without the layer in between, they couldn't happen. So I'm physical. I have to go through a warmth stage like this called the tropopause or the stratopause or all the pauses. So I go into the pause. What happens? I go into a state of warmth where if I have wonder, awe, and reverence, or I have truth, beauty, and goodness, or whatever you want to call it in my thinking, feeling, and willing, then I'm going to be carried across. And what happens then? You go into a realm where it's not your realm. You're in the angels' realm. And they're zooming around. And if you can actually develop moral imagination, you can communicate with them. But when it comes down to the inspiration in your feeling, that's going to be somewhat shocking because we tend to go where we feel. And people keep their thinking, feeling, and willing completely separate. We always like to make a joke to say, we test, start a lecture off by going, how many of you think this? How many of you feel this? How many of you have done this? And pretty soon we convince them that there's three people in their body and that if they don't get them coordinated, there's really, not a lot you're going to do for your spiritual advancement until you realize you are three separate beings going three separate directions. So when you fall into the dream state, in the feeling, in the realm of the archangels, you can come back with inspiration. 1 second of inspiration can last the rest of your life and inspire you to do things. But when you fall consciously into the realm of willing, it is terrifying. If you think falling into the abyss is bad, when you fall into your willpower, it's kind of like the fires of hell just burning you alive, and you're supposed to be happy about it, because you're a being of fire, you're a plasma being, and the fire causes the gas in you and the water and the substance in you to dissolve and go into higher realms to ascend naturally. And so when you fall into the willpower, you have superhuman strength, superhuman memory, superhuman capacities. That's why so many of these children, and I've met a bunch of them, the nonverbal autistic children, many of them are savants. Why are they savants? Because perception, is linked to memory. But memory is not in the brain. Now, you've heard all the experiments where they take an electrical probe and they touch the caudate and they touch the putamen and they touch the corpus striatum, and they touch this and that, and then all of a sudden the person gets a vivid memory where they're there, they smell it, they're doing it, they're feeling it. That's where it's stored. Memory exists in our collective unconscious and our collective superconscious. So even the memory, strangely enough, of the future is there for you to access if you can surrender and have the courage to get across the abyss, and then to get across really the bigger abyss, you could call it, where the flames are leaping up and burning you alive, because you can't take your body into those realms, right? So this is just helping you dissolve it so you can go into those realms. So there is no end to what perception can bring you if you are morally trained, if you are prepared, if you've had the golden moment of illumination, and if you're prepared to go through the trials of earth, water, air, and fire as part of initiation. If you're willing to do that, you can perceive all these things. But let me tell you a little story. One time somebody said to me, I'm getting sick of your clairvoyance, and I'm not clairvoyant anymore, but I was saying something, and he was going, oh, there you go, picking my brain again. I'm really tired of this, man. I want to be clairvoyant. Can't you just, touch me, like an NLP? If I stand next to you, don't I become clairvoyant because I'm watching the way you do it? And I said, well, yeah, that's kind of true, but I got a trick for you. Here's a double terminated crystal. I usually carry one with me. Put this under your pillow tonight, and in the morning, you will start to have clairvoyant experiences. So he put it under the pillow, and he woke up, and he could read his wife's thoughts. And he was amazed, and he went out in public, and then everyone else's thoughts started bombarding him, and he's looking at them going, all I have to do is look at them, look at their face, and I know the evil that's in them. These are some and some good people, some horrible people. He was scared to death. He comes, next time I see him, he says, take this damn crystal. I said, why? What happened? He goes, I don't ever want to have another clairvoyant experience in my life. That's what will happen to most materialists, okay? Because it will terrify you. It will scare you, and you will be like those autistic children who are overwhelmed by too much sense perception, and then they go within, and inside of all of us, because remember, these are innocent children. They've never had a bad thought. They can't. They don't have bad feelings. Have you ever seen a sad Down syndrome child? It doesn't happen. Have you ever seen one of these severely, severely challenged children that were unhappy or depressed? Doesn't happen. What do all these children say? I'm perfectly happy. I don't know why you think that I wouldn't be perfectly happy. Because why? They have the inner confirmation of who they are, which is a divine being, a co-creator God, and that comes right into their perception. But unfortunately, they can't gate the perception. They can't filter the perception. And so all the garbage comes in. And until I was taught by my teachers how to put up shields, I didn't want to go out in public. I certainly didn't want to talk to people. And I didn't want to hear their lies coming out of their mouth because it hurt me to hear them. Eventually, I was able to put up shields, learn to work with this, do the filtering and the gating. The gating, opening that up then is actually the way to go and ascend. But the filter, you have to have the filter because there's so much evil that we live in. So perception is completely determined by the person. And so we aren't actually perceiving things. We are perceiving who we are.
Yes. And so you could look at the brain. That's like your movie screen. That's where you're seeing the reflection of what's taking place in the world. And Richard Steiner talks about just after the sinking of Atlantis in the old Indian period, and this is you're talking about 15,000 years ago or so, Atlantis sinks, and so you have the beginning of the old Indian Stone Age culture, and there they didn't. They looked upon the spiritual world as that which was of interest. He calls them the people of the spirit in one of his early lecture cycles. Then when the 2,160 years later, we go into the Persian period, where Steiner calls them the people of the fire. And so you have in that period the 7 incarnations of Zarathustra, in which he developed the Mazda, the Magi stream, the stream that later became Zoroastrianism. And in that period, it was a respect for the physical world, wanting to work into the world, but as a moral being, and perceiving the divine spiritual being of the Logos coming from the sun. And then you move into the next period, 2,160 years later, the Babylonian, Egyptian, Chaldean period. He calls them the people of the stars. And so you see them as perceiving the divine spiritual beings working in the cosmos through the stars and the heavenly bodies. And then we move into the Greco-Roman period. And that's the first point at which mankind feels as if they have their firm feet on the ground. And of course, there's always overlapping, and there's people that are manifesting a consciousness of a previous epoch or a future epoch. And so it's as complicated as New York City. You walk down the street of New York City and you see so many diverse people. Well, it really is that complicated. So don't think you're going to get any simple answers, but we try to do our best to try and keep things as simple as possible.
Well, when I wrote the greeting like aloha, may the force be with you, they changed it. It was may the life force be with you. But now I'm going to change it to may the life ether be with you, because with the life ether, you can see life in every perception outside of you, inside of you, and that will create a process of ascension and nutrition that will help you turn into the angel that we all know you will become.